In the year 793, Viking raiders struck the abbey at Lindisfarne, a holy site off the coast of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Northumbria. This event was an unprecedented calamity and marked the arrival of the Vikings in the British Isles, a period of raiding, plunder, strife and warfare between the 8th and 11th centuries. The shocking impact of this event was recorded in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Here were dreadful forewarnings come over the land of Northumbria, and woefully terrified the people. These were amazing sheets of lightning and whirlwinds, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the sky. A great famine soon followed these signs, and shortly after in the same year, the woeful inroads of heathen men destroyed God's church in Lindisfarne, Ireland, by fierce robbery and slaughter. An account of the event was also recorded in the 12th century History of Kings. They came to the church of Lindisfarne, laid everything waste with grievous plundering, trampled the holy places with polluted steps, dug up the altars, and seized all the treasures of the holy church. They killed some of the brothers, took some away with them in fetters. Many they drove out, naked and loaded with insults, and some they drowned in the sea. The attack on Lindisfarne was only a sign of things to come, as monasteries and coastal settlements in England, Scotland, and Ireland were subject to the depredations of the Vikings. Monasteries were easy targets, since they were isolated, poorly defended, and contained precious goods. But the Vikings were not just raiders and thieves who struck at unguarded targets of opportunity. They were also explorers, conquerors, settlers, colonists, and traders. From the 840s, Viking attackers in Ireland began to build fortified encampments on the coast as bases for raids farther inland. These fortifications, known as long forts, grew into trading posts and larger settlements. One of the early long forts on the southern bank of the river Liffey grew to become the city of Dublin. In the early 10th century, other important Viking trade ports were established and later developed into large towns, such as Wexford, Cork, and Limerick. Under Viking rule, Dublin became an important trade centre and was home to one of Europe's largest slave markets. Captives from Ireland, Scotland, and other places were bought and sold in large numbers here, many being sent to Viking colonies in the North Atlantic. As Viking explorers began to colonize the Scottish Islands, Faroe Islands, and Iceland, Gaelic captives and Norse Gael settlers were brought over to bolster the population and provide a source of labor. Genetic evidence suggests that among the Icelandic founding population, up to 25% of the paternal gene pool and up to 60% of the maternal gene pool were of Gaelic origin. This would suggest that a significant number of Irish and Scottish women were transported, either as slaves or wives, to the Icelandic colonies. The year 865 saw a major invasion of England by the Vikings, with the so-called Great Heathen Army arriving in East Anglia. In 866, they marched into Northumbria, taking advantage of a civil war in the kingdom to capture the city of York, around which the Viking kingdom of Jorvik was established. Over a 14-year period, Viking armies overran the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, annexing large parts of northern and eastern England, or forcing the rulers to pay them tribute. In 878, the kingdom of Wessex, led by Alfred the Great, defeated the Vikings in battle and prevented them from expanding further. Nevertheless, a treaty was signed, leaving the Vikings in control of large parts of northern and eastern England. This region was known as the Danelaw, the land where the laws of the Danes were followed. The exploits of the Viking Age weren't limited to the British Isles and North Atlantic, however. Between 790 and 800, raiding also began along the coasts of western France. Once again, the Vikings targeted monasteries and poorly defended coastal settlements. By the 840s, they were sailing up the River Seine and plundered larger cities like Rouen. In 845, they even besieged Paris, entered the city, and plundered it. The Frankish king Charles the Bald was forced to pay a large ransom of 2,500 kilos of gold and silver to make them leave, and Frankish coins from the period have also been found at Viking sites in Ireland. Raiding continued in the region of the Lower Seine, including a second siege of Paris in 885 to 886. Led by their chief Rollo, the Vikings of this region were so destructive that the Franks were forced to negotiate with them. King Charles the Simple made Rollo the Count of Rouen in exchange for his allegiance, conversion to Christianity, and a promise to protect the mouth of the Seine from further Viking raids. The descendants of Rollo went on to establish the Duchy of Normandy, adopting the French language and culture, as they eventually became known as Normans. To the east, Vikings from what is now Sweden migrated east and south through modern-day Russia. They established settlements and engaged in trade in the region of Lake Ladoga, which also brought them into contact and conflict with the Slavic tribes of the area. The most famous of these Vikings was Rurik, who, according to legend, was invited to rule over the city of Novgorod in 862. Rurik's descendants established a state known as the Kievan Rus, which united the East Slavic tribes and expanded from the White Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south, covering large parts of modern-day Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Members of the Rurikid dynasty also established the Duchy of Muscovy and eventually the Tsardom of Russia, laying the foundations of the Russian nation. Navigating the Volga River, the Rus also made their way south to the Black Sea, establishing trade links with the Arab world. The Persian geographer Ibn Khordadbeh described how Rus traders brought goods from Scandinavia all the way to Baghdad. They transport beaver hides, the pelts of the black fox, and swords from the farthest reaches of Sakaleba to the Sea of Rum. If they wish, they go to the Tanais River, or Itil. They travel to the city of the Khazars, whose ruler takes a tithe of them. Then they betake themselves to the Sea of Jurjan, and alight on whichever of its shores they wish. Sometimes they carry their goods from Jurjan by camel to Baghdad. They also made their way down the rivers Dnieper and Dniester to the Black Sea, and from there to Constantinople, which was a major center of global trade. The Vikings brought goods such as fur, amber, and slaves for trade with Byzantine and Arab merchants. In exchange, they received silk, jewelry, and silver. Hoards of Arab silver coins from the 9th and 10th centuries have been found in Scandinavia as evidence of these trade links. Now, this has been an introduction to some of the major events of the Viking Age, but it leaves many questions unanswered. What drove the Vikings to leave Scandinavia in search of land, plunder, and trade? What became of the dynasties and kingdoms they established? And why did their age of exploration and expansion come to an end? We will investigate these questions and others in the upcoming videos.